Welcome back to Payrolling. In today's episode, I'm joined by Jeff Garrison from Results on Purpose. Jeff heads up a coaching firm that predominantly focuses on payroll bureau owners and leadership teams. And so he does things like mastermind groups and coaching programs that help these organizations that are trying to grow, that are trying to break through plateaus, that are trying to see around corners and really achieve their vision and sometimes even cast that vision. So I think it was a really great episode learning about his purview and how he coaches up small business and payroll bureau owners and leaders. I think you're going to gain a lot of insight from it. I know I did. I've always enjoyed every conversation I've had with him. I did have him give us a little bit of an intro on the front, which is unusual for a payrolling episode. So hopefully it was valuable to get some context. If you're enjoying the show, please make sure you subscribe on your podcast player of choice and give us a 5-star on Apple or Spotify. We really appreciate it. Appreciate everybody tuning in. I think you're going to really enjoy this one. Check it out.
Welcome to Payrolling, the show where you will learn how to operate and grow your payroll business from the most dynamic minds in the business. If your company offers payroll services, this is the podcast for you. And now, here's your host, Matt Vady. Let's go.
Are you tired of dealing with payroll? Would you just like to finally get out of this industry and start focusing on what you actually do best, whether you're a CPA, healthcare broker, whatever your core discipline is? You started offering payroll services because you thought it would be a great value add. And then you quickly realized, well, this is consuming way more time for not enough money than I originally thought. Did you know that we are actively acquiring payroll books of business? We would love to work with you to identify if we can help you to partner with the right group that makes sense for an exit for you, but creates consistency in how you continue to treat your clients. If you're interested in learning more about Guru's acquisition services, simply go to guru.co/acquisitions. That's GUROO.co/acquisitions. Jeff, thank you so much for joining me today. Appreciate your time. And we're going to do something a little bit unique today. Most episodes, I don't have the person intro themselves because I always get worried that there's going to be this big, long, drawn-out introduction on their entire life history, and it's not really all that appealing to the audience, and I can make it much more condensed in the intro before you come on. But I thought, given the context of what you do and how you work with payroll bureau owners and the different things that you do over the course of your practice, that it might be interesting to hear a little bit about your background and what you do today. If you don't mind, share a little bit with us about what you do.
Okay, well, I'll try to keep it short. I am a business coach, and about half my portfolio happens to be payroll companies, and it's somewhat accidental, but I was VP of sales and marketing at a pretty good size PEO in my past, so there's a natural connection there. But as a business coach, I'm kind of more like the quarterback coach. You know, quarterbacks, Tom Brady's great, but he still has somebody who's just giving him that extra perspective, helping him understand how to be the best with the players he has to work with, not just learning how to throw the ball, but, how to work and be a leader with all the assets at his disposal. And so specifically, I work with business owners and their leadership teams, and by helping them grow, we help their businesses grow. That's the nutshell version, Matt.
I love it. I love it. Thanks for keeping it under 2 minutes. No. So, well, let's dive into that. I've always got this interesting relationship with coaches as it relates to, it's a very in vogue thing to become a coach these days, but there's also the other side of that coin, and you nailed it, right? There's never been a Tom Brady, a Michael Jordan, a high performer who's ever done what they did without having a coach, somebody who could push them beyond what they might be able to do with their own sort of personal limitations. And so I think that's going to drive a lot of this conversation. But one of the first things I wanted to try to understand, I know you work with a lot of payroll bureaus, payroll bureau leadership teams. What are some of the commonalities you see among the high performing leaders and their organizations?
In a word, it's clarity. They are clear about a lot of things, but it all comes together. Clarity about who they are, who their market is, what they're trying to achieve, what they stand for as a business. What's their mission or what's their purpose. Clear about what behaviors they expect from their team members, what results they expect from everybody. And I know that's a lot of stuff thrown into a one-word answer, clarity, but as the owner and as the leadership team, they focus on making everything that's important very clear to everyone, right down to the a receptionist for those that still have that person, all the way up to what does everyone expect from the owner. So just clarity all around.
Yeah. And setting expectations, right? And having that vision. Those are all critical things when you look at the growth curve. And on that, so you've got a guy like me who's kind of, I don't want to say an entrepreneur, but I definitely get shiny object syndrome with the best of them. And it is hard to keep me on track with a certain initiative. We use the EOS process. We've talked about it on here before. I've talked to you about it, entrepreneurial operating system through book Traction by Gino Wickham. But I heard a great analogy the other day, and Kelly and Mike, I hope you're listening in. So Kelly from Organic Payroll and Mike Colleth, we talked about how Mike was the kite and he had one of his teammates who was the string, who had to help keep him sort of in the right place. And, even though he kept flying off and going after all these different things, like you got to have that string to kind of keep you where you need to go. And I related to that a lot, right? Because that's me in a nutshell, is that I tend to get off and working on a lot of different projects that I think are important and I think are part of the overall vision. And then in reality, when you take a step back, they're not. How do you work with leaders when you get somebody like me who can get easily distracted and who sees a lot of shiny objects, and help them to keep that clarity and focus?
Well, we just don't allow shiny objects. It's when we make a plan and everything goes on the results map, where we're going in the long term and where we want to hit mid-range. But of course, those shorter term 1 year and quarterly deliverables is what we call them. But once we've decided where we're going, we have worked hard as a leadership team, been really focused to determine what is mission critical for where we want to go. And we're not allowed to throw other stuff in, unless it's just so obvious if we put it off that we're going to have a problem. So just shiny objects just aren't allowed. There's a time and a place to talk about them and be on purpose about, where we're going and what we're doing. But basically it's not allowed. And your leadership team would hold you accountable for not bringing things in, and blowing up the plan is what happens. There's a couple of things that, we've learned along the way, especially with owners like you, and we call them drive-by deliverables. And it's where an owner will come in, he'll walk through the door in the morning, and the first leader he sees, he starts spouting off about, what he thought about when he was having breakfast this morning. And a lot of business owners, they have influence skills and enthusiasm, and they're sharing their ideas, and then they're walking away and they're leaving the impression a lot of times that somebody needs to get started on this. It might not even meant that we're going to jump into it, but they leave the impression that somebody needs to do this. And now somebody's left, well, do I try to do it all? Do I drop something? So drive-by deliverables, we put a title on it so we can label it when it's happening and say it's not allowed. And here's the big reason it's not allowed. I talk about blowing up the plan. We have a concept that we call compounding effort. It's like compounding interest. When you make your regular deposits and are disciplined about it, where you're going to be 5 years down the road compared to that person who makes intermittent, inconsistent deposits. There's a big gap, right? It's the same with quarterly deliverables, and quarterly deliverables are like rocks in EOS or goals in different system. We call them deliverables because it's not a goal. It's not an okay if you get close or don't do it, or something we're going to try for, but you deliver. If you're a leader, you have deliverables. So to go back to compounding effort, when we have maybe 5 deliverables as a leadership team and we've got 90 days to execute, if we allow something to go over a couple of weeks and wrap it up during that couple of weeks or month, what we have done is at that quarterly planning meeting, we have limited our capacity going into the next quarter because we're wrapping stuff up. And so we're not getting that compounding effort relative to the team that executes 4 or 5 things. They plan it and they execute it, and then they go on and plan 4 or 5 things more and execute it. At the end of 3 years, you might have done like 60 on the business things completely done. And if you think about it, if you look back over your last 12 quarters, if you had accomplished 60 things on the business that you planned on purpose, and when we plan on purpose, we determine exactly what results we want, what outcome determines if we were successful or not. When you do it that well, it's like that investor that just is consistent about the level of investment and timing all the time. So we get compounding effort. So when you allow drive-by deliverables, that's like taking that investment money every once in a while and going to buy something fun. It feels good, but a few quarters down the road, you're like, what did I get? Other than confusion. So anyway, yeah, that's a long answer. That's more like a longer lecture when I'm working with teams, and I do give it over and over again. I tend to beat things to death so that, like a coach, so it becomes ingrained in everybody. And I know it's working when they're telling things back to me.
Well, using that investment analogy, I think, is a good thought pattern when we look at, so if you were to change up your mix of investments inside your portfolio every 12 months and say, I've got a 15% allocation in long-term bonds, but next year I'm going to go 30%, and then I'm going to change it up to 40% the year after that, and I'm going to change it back to 10. Obviously your results would be diminished because you would not have a consistent application in the market, and therefore not reap the rewards of the strategy, right? Because there is no strategy at that point. You're just going back to the shiny object analogy, you're just kind of darting around and letting the market dictate where you're going. And so I think there's a lot to that. But now one of the biggest struggles that I think we all have, right, is so I'll go back to the process we use. We cast this 10-year vision, which is kind of like throwing the rock out there and saying, okay, at 10 years, here's where we want to be. Now we back that down into 3 years, 1 year, quarters, et cetera. But now that 10-year vision can be a real struggle, right? Because 10 years from now, technology is going to be so much different than what it is today. How we deliver our service is going to be so much different than how we do it today. And so to cast a vision like that almost feels a little, it can get a little strange because I'm sharing, or we as a leadership team are sharing things that you could trying to get people to be able to wrap their minds around it today, all the while knowing that there are underlying fundamental shifts in technology that are going to happen along the way where we're going to be, we can't even see it ourselves, right? So how do we balance that? How do we cast a vision that's clear as day, that people can understand and they can get behind, but yet also knowing that, especially in an industry where in tech-enabled services, the technology is going to change so drastically over the next 10 years, we can't really have a clear vision of where we're going.
Yeah. Well, how you define vision or how you shape it matters in this question. Because strategies, if your vision is defining the strategy, then that is going to change. Look, technology is forcing us to change strategy all the time. Look at what happened with COVID and how many people had to embrace like this form of communication. And, for some, it has changed like their sales strategy or their delivery strategy. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the vision they had to be in a certain place has to change. So what I'm saying is if vision and strategy, if you have them wrapped up together, yeah, it's gonna change all the time. Because strategy, how long does a good strategy last? 2 or 3 years at best before you might have to make some significant adjustments to it. But if your vision is, perhaps I'll use where I want to be. What my thing is, I want to have 10,000 fans by a certain date. And what I mean by that is I want people tuning into our content and being impacted by it. And so how I achieve that, is going to change over time. Our delivery model, right now we're starting to build an app, okay? And so the app and how you deliver content, it's a new strategy to achieve that longer term vision. So I hope this is answering your question, but what I would say, if the vision is shifting all the time, then maybe it's the vision itself was not clear enough to begin with. It was more of a strategy.
That's fair. And I think a lot of us, I know a lot of people listening, I talk to them and I know a lot of them personally, and they struggle with that. Hey, look, here's where I'm going to be in 5 years. I don't know where I'm going to be in 5 years, Matt. Like, I don't know if I'm going to still be doing this. I don't know if I'm going to sell it. I don't know if I'm going to be here, there, or the other. Like, and that's not, heck, I'm in mastermind groups here locally where I'm the only one in our industry in the group, but everybody's in the same boat, right? Whether they've owned their business for 20 years. My partner wants to get out in 3 years, and I want to keep going until, I pass it off to my kids. And so there's, 5 years ago, if you'd asked me that question, I'd have said I'd sold it by now. And so those things change certainly over time, and it's our life stage and the success of our business, right? There's always that thing where people say, build the business as if you're going to sell it, but by the time it's ready to sell, it'll be running so well that you probably won't want to. And so, and you'll be making good money and all the fun things that come along with that. So there are those elements to it as well. And I think we could talk about that for a long time, but I kind of want to shift gears a little bit and talk about, so we talked about shiny objects, but I also see some folks who get so head down where they're not opening their eyes to the opportunities in the market. And so are you seeing ever folks where it's like, hey, look, this isn't necessarily a shiny object. This is a shift in the market that you might want to start paying attention to. And how do you navigate those situations?
Yeah. So, well, if you miss it, you miss it. People need to stay engaged with what's happening. If you never network with anybody, if you never tune into a podcast, go to a conference, you're not going to know what's going on. And I guess that's the answer is if you're missing opportunities, if you're missing changes in the market, it's because you're not paying attention. Now, why does that happen? It happens because you get too caught up in the weeds as an owner, or you've allowed your other leaders that you might want to be paying attention. They're too caught up in the weeds of the business. That's a whole different issue. That kind of takes us right back to clarity, and that the owners don't know what results they are responsible for as owners. A lot of times they think they're responsible for fixing everything. It's my name on the door and blah, blah, blah. But, they haven't allowed people to take ownership for whatever reason, or they have hired the kind of people who won't take ownership, or they just haven't made it clear what people want. So, that's a reason that stuff happens, is the operation is not working well without the owner. So the owner's too bogged down to see the forest, right?
And I want to come back to that. How do you get the owner out of the business? And I think that's a struggle we all have, regardless of size and kind of what our role is. But you touched on something there I just want to piggyback on, and that's, if by the time you're going to a conference or you're part of an association, you're getting this information that they've put the stamp on and said, hey, this is good to speak to a larger audience, it's not bleeding edge anymore, right? So you can have some comfort in knowing that, like, you're not learning about something that's bleeding edge technology, like, oh, wow, this is how we offer HR software. This is how, like, this is the type of stuff where an association general is probably not going to put their name and put their stamp of approval on somebody doing a keynote or a web conference on something that's just like brand new to the market, no proven. So opening your mind to those sorts of concepts and ideas and being a part of associations, and I know there's a variety of them, and we'll give I guess every single episode shout out to IPPA here, where you've got to get involved, you've got to hear what the others in the market are doing, and understand that by the time it's getting to you, they've probably been doing it for a minute, right? And they validated it, and they didn't make it up themselves. They got it from somebody else, and it's trickled down through. So interesting stuff for sure. But let's go back to that, because I know this is one of the primary focuses whenever working with your team is like, hey, how do we get the operation disconnected from the owner, give them some of their lives, give them the ability to cast the vision, give them the ability to steer the ship, but also understanding that, hey, look, this business was built with them at the center of it, and now we're having to try to move them out of the center. How do you go about that?
Good question. And it's, sort of detailed answer, for me. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. I want to say one thing about vision and owners. We were on that vision strategy question, and what I find almost 100% across the board when I start working with the leadership team is the vision they have cast is too small. They think too small. And I don't mean that as a criticism. It's just the way it is. It's just sort of a habit. And, with my experience and having done this and worked with a lot of other companies, it's helpful to come in and just sort of push the boundaries a little bit and let people absorb it. All the what ifs. Why can't we do this or that? And so when those visions, if they're changing or if they're wishy-washy, it's because, man, it's not big enough that people get really invested in. In other words, it's like, it's okay to switch because it wasn't that big a deal in the first place. But man, what if it's a big deal? And what if you have a little bit of belief in it? And this is what's interesting, is that at first, a lot of times we kind of get that vision cast and start working on it. And there's about this much belief, and maybe there's like one other person on the leadership team that's got a little bit. But, we get those deliverables done in the first quarter. And there's a little bit more belief from somebody. And then the next quarter, the deliverables get done. And we look back at the end of the year and we hit the 1-year goals. I mean, actually hit the 1-year goals. And that belief starts to go up and everybody starts to think bigger. And, then they get more excited about the vision. And people, if there's changes, it's because it continues to get bigger. So, anyways, it's
well, let me add on to that real quick before we move on to the next part. One of the things I realized quickly about casting a vision and getting very intentional about a vision, and this is for business, for your personal life. There's a fantastic book sitting on my shelf here behind me. The guy who wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul, or whatever the Success Principles, I believe it's called. And, he does the vision board thing in there, and he's got an exercise for it, but I'll be damned if you don't do this exercise. And then as you start to look, you go forward a couple months, couple years, and you start to see everything in your life, everything in your personal and professional life start to make headway towards this vision that you've cast, right? And the same thing in your business. If you put that moonshot out there and then you start to realize, like, hey, that's where we're going, you'll start to see the dominoes fall and the things come into place to create that vision and make it a reality. But if you don't have the end result vision in place, then, if you have no target, you'll hit it every time. That's what we always say. And so that's kind of the environment you get stuck in. And I think it's really, really important to go through. I know for a lot of us, it's painful to go through this. Like, I literally have a Google Doc with the pictures in it and all the bullets on how I want to feel personally, how much I want to give to charity, where I want a vacation, what I want my house to look like, all that stuff, like as corny as it is, it's all coming closer to reality since I did it. Right. And so every time I go back and look at it, I'm like, dang, this is crazy.
Yes, yeah,
But
you just keep knocking stuff off. And we do it as a regular practice when I'm working with teams, but as an individual, I would recommend that maybe sit down every day and just take 10 minutes and write stuff out. It's actually a good practice to start with, because what you'll find is that every day some things kind of come and go on that list of what you want to achieve, but then there winds up being this core list of things that kind of bubble to the top, that always make that list every time you sit down and do it. And wherever that comes from, those things that you want to achieve, I mean, that's core for you. And then focus on those things. Everything else that's sort of at the bottom of the list and that comes and goes, those are the distractions from achieving that stuff that's really important to you.
absolutely.
So, and it's like that in business. We talked about the shiny objects, and you got to know what's really important to what you want as an owner, what outcome you want from this thing, but then, what you want it to look and feel like for you and your employees. And then just discern over time what are distractions and what's really getting you where you want to go. And of course, there's people happy to email and call you every day with distractions that, they have, right? So, and of course, they're doing their job, but
no, and I mean, I think the other thing you have to think about there, and this is something we were just going through as a leadership team, is casting a 10-year vision that's exciting to you might not be exciting to your team, right? Like, to do $25 million in revenue, like, what's in it for me if I'm a teammate? Like, maybe it's one thing to say, hey, this is our monetary goal. What does this mean to you? Well, this means more opportunities to grow. This means more leadership positions. This means more lateral movement. This means personal, professional development. It means more President's Club trips, whatever that thing is. That's great. But casting a vision that's exciting and isn't just about like, hey, 10 years from now, we'll have sold and I'll be living on a yacht. And I'm so excited you guys got to be a part of the process. Like, what happens along the way? What's in it for me? What makes that growth of the company exciting for me personally? And I think that is an area where we all struggle, because selfishly, you start a business. Like me, I'm 100% owner. I have no partners. So anytime I'm casting a vision, I've got that personal element of it. But in reality, it's kind of fun. This past week, we were doing our review of the last 90 days. What was the most exciting thing to happen to you professionally? I was like, interestingly enough, the most exciting thing to happen to me professionally is we had a teammate pass the 5-year mark. We're only 7 years old. We're about to turn 7 years old. And we had somebody pass the 5-year mark. And that is so freaking cool to see somebody who's been with us for 5 years and like the next person that's going to be with us for 5 years. And like, that's such an amazing thing that she found it. It a valuable enough place to work for her to suit her personal needs. And we were able to provide, a great culture for her to develop and grow in. And then, we give away a trip around the world once you hit 5 years. So it's definitely extra exciting for us to give that trip away and make the most of it. So,
oh yeah.
so yeah, so casting a vision, giving people incentives to stay, definitely a big part of that whole process.
Yeah, it is. And interesting, you mentioned like the 25 million by a certain time, that there's nothing wrong with that type of goal. But as you're alluding to it, to expand on that kind of vision about the impact, what does it mean to be making 25 million? What's the impact on your community, on your families, your staff? And the more you can tie the actual vision into the impact you want to have, and then, you can say, and to have this impact, we need to be making 25 million in gross revenue by this time. It's just a little bit, it's the same, but how it's communicated, it's a better picture.
Yeah.
So, that's one thing. We're kind of generally talking about how to have people on board, right? And have it be important to them. So how you cast that vision obviously makes a difference. You can speak to different types of people wired different ways based on how you do it. But also, we have to accept that we may have to change team members. We don't change our vision, right, to make it great for everybody who's involved. It's okay to change members of the team. It's like if you're a head coach for a professional football team, and I use football analogies all the time. I apologize to those people who are not NFL fans or don't care about sports analogies, but it's just easy for me. But if you're building a football team, the goal is the Super Bowl. And anyone that cares more about, something else, their number one thing isn't the Super Bowl. Well, they may be extraordinarily talented, but they just don't belong on your team. So if people aren't, this is one of those things when you're recruiting, when you're hiring, when you're coaching your teammates, if they are not inspired by where you're going and into it, it doesn't mean where you're going is wrong. It just means they're wrong for where you're going. Change them out. You'll get further with people of even less talent, but that care about what you're trying to achieve.
Let me ask you a question. Are you the go-to person in your market for payroll and HR? Are you the first face and name somebody thinks of when they think about who am I going to refer this person that needs help with their payroll and HR support? If not, you might want to look into our executive LinkedIn management service through Underdog Digital. Underdog Digital is a sponsor of this show, and they've seen results such as, I'm looking at one profile right here where over the course of 6 months, they increased views by over 200%, more than 600,000 views on these posts in less than 6 months. Another one, plus 1,000% increase in 8 new conversations in the first 30 days. This is a tremendous service to help you to become the go-to person for payroll and HR outsourcing in your market. They create content for you, engage with other people in your space, send connection requests, and do outreach to generate conversations that do nothing more than create valuable relationships with your target audience. If you're interested in learning more about Underdog Digital's executive LinkedIn management service, go to underdogdigital.co. That's underdogdigital.co. It's interesting. I have this conversation with clients a lot. They get very particularly our marketing clients, right? So we have a marketing agency inside our business, and they'll be like, "Oh, well, we don't want that picture on the website because it's got these 5 people in it, and 2 of them aren't here anymore. No, we don't want so many pictures of employees on the website because what if they leave?" And it's like, going back to that sports analogy. So Tom Brady wins a Super Bowl and then gets traded the next season. Do they take all the pictures off the wall? No, they don't. I mean, they still have the pictures of the team. They still celebrate the championships like they were a part of that championship team. But yes, who got you here might not get you there. And I think if anybody has never read the Netflix culture document, find the old version on SlideShare. Just Google Netflix culture document SlideShare, and they have one of the best philosophies out there about how you grow a high-performing team. And it's a little extreme for most of us, but their philosophy is, hey, we are a team, not a family. So we are a high-performing sports team, which means that if you are not a high-performing individual, you will be cut from the team, and you will get a healthy severance package and move on your way. And so I think there's some balance there for most of us as small businesses, right? I mean, they've got to, they also do some other things that we're not able to do. They pay market plus or top of market plus, right? So they're consistently going out and evaluating what's the highest earning person in your role getting in the country. We're going to pay you that plus. I wish we had the resources to do that. So we can't copy everything Netflix does, but definitely some good nuggets there. And a great book from them recently, I'll give a plug to, is No Rules, Rules. Highly suggest that book. But let's get back on target here. Speaking of shiny objects. So
you wanted it to be a conversation, right?
Yeah. Well, this is how I talk, right? But one of the things that I hadn't thought about it before we were preparing, but it's always top of mind for me. And I think it's a struggle for a lot of us is KPIs, key performance indicators. So if we're going to go from, here to there and then continue to grow, what should we be paying attention to? And I know this is something that you work with your clients on very diligently, are like, hey, what are some of the levers that we want to look at and be able to pull and manipulate as we grow? What are some of the KPIs that you see for maybe the smaller firms and the growing firms? And then as they continue to grow, how do those change and evolve?
Everybody has things a little bit different, and it does depend upon your sophistication. I mean, that's not the right word, but probably financial sophistication and how well you can, measure some of the more difficult numbers. Your system has a lot to do with it too. How you can pull stuff out.
True.
Of course, the number one thing has to do with sales activity. So your salespeople, if that's how your marketing is direct with salespeople, have to have so many first time appointments or first business meetings every month, period. So that's, and the leadership team should be paying attention to that. First business meetings, proposals, and deals closed are the only three numbers that really matter for sales leadership. All the other minutia is just minutia, and if you have to manage it, then you got the wrong salesperson. But beyond that, error rate is a big one, and it's internally caused error rate, right? Yeah, or sometimes it's just measured by corrections. So if we got to make a paycheck correction, and is it because it was misreported, or was it a keystroke error or something like that? So paying attention to that. I mean, I have a client that, set a bar to bring them down and rewards everybody, when the team hit that. So that's a common thing. Some, if you've got more of a sophisticated phone system, can measure the phone calls or issues that people handle. I mean, some, like if you've got a ticketing system, that's people measure different things around that number of tickets that are coming in, how many are getting handled, like per associate, what types of issues are people having. So it's good analysis stuff, but the bigger you are, the more important actually the numbers are. But I'm a big believer in numbers, because we can have one bad story and it can, we can think the reality is this when it's nowhere close. You know what I'm saying? It's, oh, this happened, so we got to go write a whole nother process to fix it, when it just happened once, kind of thing. So I don't know if that's a great answer to your question about what people are measuring, but
it's what I found as well. It's kind of all over the board. For us, we've got our scorecard of stuff we're measuring every week. We've got 3 metrics for the year that we're tracking, and there are goals for the year, and that's related to new clients, amount of money donated to charity. So we're a mission-based company. We give 3% of all of our revenue away. So it's an easier way to say, hey, look, if we give away this amount to charity, then we're going to obviously have done this amount in revenue. So that's, a great way to make that target a little bit more meaningful to all of us. And then client retention rate, obviously, which is even another number that we struggle with, because it's like we've had 3 clients get acquired in the last month, and it's like 3 of our biggest clients, and we're going, well, okay, so we check them off, we leave them in, like it just starts getting fudgy right out of the gate, even with client retention numbers. But I'm going to go back to something you said, and you just kind of threw it in there. But even if you're a single owner operator right now, you should have some sort of help desk software, and you should have an email address for people to send support tickets to that is not your personal email. Because if you're setting up 20, 30, 40, 50 clients with matt@ergpayroll.com, they're never getting off that email address. And so if you set them up from the start with support@ergpayroll.com, then now it makes it much easier to use a system that can track that. You can track response times. No matter how small you are or how big you are, response times matter. It's the number one thing that comes back to us on all of our surveys, all of our client interviews on what we're doing well is responsiveness. And that's because we have a metric that we track. We expect a less than 2-hour response time on every email, and we're under that nearly every week. If we're not, there's some weird anomaly where like somebody got assigned a ticket that was like spam or something random. But so yeah, if you set that up, and you should also just put there's a million help desk softwares out there, Zendesk, whatever. We use Zoho Desk. It's perfectly fine. They all do a good job depending on your needs. If you're small, getting something that's embedded into your mail system, like a Gmail extension, golly, I got a friend who uses a Gmail one that I don't know the name of, but it's really good. But so
Yeah.
highly recommend that. Definitely need a way to track that and get it out of your inbox, because otherwise it's going to be a total pain when you go to transition. You make that first hire and, oh, now just email Susie with all your questions. And then Susie leaves, and then, oh, you just email here. And that now what starts happening, you start losing clients because they go, oh, there's constant turnover and I don't know who I'm actually supposed to be emailing. Where if it's support, it's always getting answered. And we use it as a benefit, not a, because that'll be the first thing you'll say is, well, I'm working with you, Matt, because I love being able to talk to you. Well, that's great, but we want you to get a response in less than 2 hours. And so we want the person who's available, who has the information that you need, to respond to you as quickly as possible. So definitely, sorry, a little another tangent there, but
no, that's, I just the first piece about get a support at right off the bat. That is a great idea. And I'll bet there's 1,000 people listening there like,
yeah,
you should have.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It took me a long while to get unhooked from the email chains, in years 2 and 3 in there, where it was, everybody transitioning from me to support people. So yeah, let's keep going down that path of, rowing in the same direction. I mean, you talked about getting all of our teammates kind of aligned with the vision. You talked about the people who got us here might not be the people to get us there. How do we identify that? How do we know which teammates are actually slowing our growth, and how do we get everybody rowing in the same direction?
Okay. So there's 2 groups that we're talking about. We're talking about your leadership team, and we're talking about everybody else. Speaking about the leadership team first, we'll go back to the deliverables that we talked about and the compounding effort that we get. One thing that normally happens is that, well, first of all, after my first day working with the leadership team, it is right now just under 30% of the time that at the end of the day, someone on your leadership team will say, I no longer want to be on the leadership team. Or sometimes they say, I no longer want to be at the company. That first day we start getting clarity around what results each person owns in their role. And it's not a bad thing, but a lot of times people wind up getting hired to do one thing. They've got talent, their job morphs. It doesn't necessarily morph to something that they want to do, or they get wearing too many hats. And then, the day I come in and say, okay, if your name's going to be in this box, here are the results that you're accountable for. And when we talk about results, we are not talking about the stuff that you do. Those are strategies and tactics. That's what most people consider to be, what they're supposed to do. So no, you're hired to get a result. How you do it is largely up to you. Here's how we kind of recommend you do it. But, if we're telling our leaders how to do their job, then they don't actually own their job, right? They don't own the results. We do. If what we tell them to do doesn't work, then it's our fault. So
it's close to home, brother.
Yeah. So a lot of times when they find out, this is what I'm going to be held accountable for, this result, and I don't want to be the one to figure it out or own that. And so in a very positive way, they'll let the rest of the team know, and we can work out a transition. The longest transition took a year for to find the right person and, to get it handled. And then that person actually left the company and became a vendor for the company. So they were still leveraging his talent and helping him grow his own business. So it's a really positive thing when it works that way. I had to throw that in. But so when we define the results and how we're going to measure it, people either get them or they don't. It's just black and white. They get them or they don't. And if they don't, then, we have to transition them off the leadership team. And if there's no role for them, it's out of the company. And so people expose themselves because of the clarity and accountability that's put in place. There's also the deliverables themselves. And something that often happens is we just find that a person on the leadership team, albeit, maybe they're good at being in the weeds in their area, but they're not good at delivering on strategic initiatives for the company. Or it might even be just tactical overhauls, but they're always late, or what they deliver is not exactly what we expected. And so those people, they get smoked out, so to speak. And we just have to have a conversation. So, maybe, for us to get that big vision that we have, we've perhaps got the wrong person in place. On the flip side, you also validate that, everybody else can grow with you. They've learned to execute and they've learned to deliver upon the results. There's no more confusion. So they're not running around guessing and, trying to do great work for the company. We've said this is what great work looks like, and they're delivering. And that's awesome. And that's where we get like real gas in the engine, is when people are clear about that and we just execute. So that's at the leadership team level. With everything else, it's all about performance coaching. And so, we've developed over time a performance coaching form. And, on that form, we make it, there's a box for what the vision of the company is. And everybody is constantly reminded what the vision is. And in, my client companies, you can go ask anybody and they can tell you. And they know what the mindset, you might call them core values. We use the language mindset because your mind is set, it doesn't change. And, these days, what passes for values, it's sketchy. So anyway, we use the term mindset, and everybody knows, we say what they are, but they're constantly reminded of what the expected behavior looks like inside the company. And then we have a box that defines what results you own. And so everybody understands that. And let me give you a really easy example of this. Have you ever, called your cell phone carrier and had a poor experience with that person on the other end of the line? And you can have that. You can have a poor experience and at the same time get your problem solved, right? They'll get your questions answered or they'll fix the thing, but the experience of getting help and service didn't feel good. But if that person's supervisor came along and said, "How did that call go?" They'll say, "Great, I got all their problems solved. I fixed it." There's a disconnect about what results they own. The real result that they probably should own and what should be communicated to them is their job is to enhance the relationship with the customer with every call or every interaction. That's the way I would define it. They think their job is to fix the problems. Fixing the problems, all the tools that they're given to do that stuff in the systems, those are just the tactics they deploy to get the result that they should. And we can do that. What's the result that a payroll processor owns? Is it to get the paychecks out, accurately and on time? Yeah, we might define it that way. Maybe it's something, a little different, but if they think it's just, it's bigger, or, when your people call in, when your customers call in and they get that 2-hour response time, is the 2-hour response time the result that we're looking for? That's just a tactic, right, to get something else. And so we need to be absolutely clear with everybody what that result is that they're supposed to own. And, when it's laid out for them, and they also laid out what the mindset they are to have and the overall mission of the company, it all comes together. And if it resonates with them, then they're a keeper employee. If it doesn't, even if they can get through all the stuff, they're probably not a keeper employee. And, part of that performance coaching includes a description of, what it looks like when you're getting the result that you own. How does it get done? And ideally, that's a conversation between the manager and employee or manager and team. Let's all talk about if on a team, account manager team, they probably all own the same result. So as a team, let's talk about what it looks like when we're achieving this kind of result for the company, which is contributing to the big mission of the company. And when you got a team all on the same page, that's where we really accelerate things. And so getting people on the same page is work. And, these conversations have to happen on a regular basis. At a minimum, every 90 days, we just repeat this stuff with everybody and give them feedback about how they're doing. And if they're not doing well, we give them a very short leash to fix it. And if they can't fix it, we call it the ICU, intensive coaching unit, that people fall into. And, which is another conversation, but, how do we fix it if there is a problem? That's what happens. But it's through performance coaching that we keep people on the same page, which, by the way, is one of the hardest things to get leaders to consistently do, because they are caught up in the weeds and they push this stuff back, they delay it. They have to be held accountable for getting these things done. And it is the only way for them really to get out of the weeds, because they smoke out their own good performers and bad performers. They upgrade their team. With each new hire, you should be raising the performance bar, right? So when they can smoke out the bad people, and they have an ICU program, the intensive coaching unit, to quickly coach them up or out, and it's a 60-day process, up or out, and replace them if they're out. That's how you raise the performance bar. And that's how the middle managers get out of the weeds, so they have time to do that stuff. That's how it all works. That's how you get gas in the engine. Is again, the very first question you asked me today was, my answer was clarity. We're getting clarity from top to bottom about, why you're here, what results you're supposed to achieve, and clarity about what happens if you don't get the results that we want. As good a person as you might be, if you're not a fit, you don't get to stay on this team. You're going somewhere else.
That's tremendous. And I think it's one of the things, let's face it, we all own human resources, outsourcing businesses in some capacity, whether that's just payroll or you're doing full HRO or PEO. So if you're not having consistent feedback conversations with your team, you're basically a fraud, right? Because you're out there telling all your clients that's what they should be doing. These are great best practices that relate to growing a high performing team. And then you show back up at the office, and when, the monthly plan and review or performance conversations show up on your calendar, you push them for some other fire that's going on or some initiative that needs to be taken care of. And it's the easiest thing in the world to do. Every month I do plan and reviews with every member of my team. And it's the first thing where it's like there's 50 other things I need to get done. Like, I need to move this meeting, but you cannot, right? Those have to be your rocks in the jar, going back to the old analogy. But yeah, great stuff. And I think it's also just, so one of the more interesting things when you start to think about this and really unpack it, and I could talk about this for another hour, but we're going to wrap up here in just a second, is that people crave and want that feedback, and people want to opportunities for growth. It's when there's a study that was done among millennials by, I think, PricewaterhouseCoopers a couple of years back. And one of the most valued benefits when choosing a new employer was opportunities for personal development. And so that those conversations, that feedback, those training mechanisms, those ways to improve, they're actually benefits. They're not just things that are benefiting the organization. They're wildly beneficial to the individual who wants to grow as a professional. And so if you lose sight of that and you start to think about it only from the organization's perspective, then that's exactly what will happen. You lose sight, you lose your way. And so that's great stuff, man.
Yeah, if you're coaching somebody, you're sending the message that they matter.
Right.
That their performance matters, their job matters, you matter because I'm investing in you. If you're just waiting until the issues are so big that, it's just time to part ways, you've dropped the ball. And of course, by the time you get there, they've probably chased off some of your good employees.
Well, and let's get clear here. He touched on the word coaching, and I know Jeff does a lot of this, and coaching is not, so we're going to stick to the sports analogy. Sorry, everybody, but I'm wearing Garnet today. I'm a Gamecock alum. And, we just had Will Muschamp get fired here. And I always use a picture of him on the slide when I do our coaching training for our clients, because we talk about, coaching. A lot of people hear that term and they think a coach telling someone what to do. And, you've got Will Muschamp being sort of the extreme example of that, screaming at somebody, hair all a mess, sweaty, and just, reaming some kid out as he's coming off the field for a missed assignment. Whereas in reality, coaching is asking questions and understanding that people have the answers, the insight, the power inside of them. And it's your job to tease that information out with hard questions that force them to think, that force them to recall the information, that force them to recall that vision, that mindset, those values that you've been washing them in for years, months, weeks, decades, whatever it is, and giving them the inspiration to draw it out, not giving them the answers. Because going back to your earlier comment, like once we just start giving everybody the list of responsibilities instead of, hey, here are the desired outcomes or results, then, we don't really have a leader. We don't really have somebody who's going to grow. We have somebody who's just a task rabbit. And so it's hard to get off that train sometimes because you got a to-do list, you got a million things you want to get done. And it's just so much easier sometimes as a leader to say, do it this way. This is the way I want you to do it because this is the way we've always done it. But in reality, let's also face it, they might actually have a better way to do it if you let them do it the way they want to do it. So, great stuff. I know we're coming up on time here. You said you're trying to certainly develop a lot of content. What's some of the content that you've been creating that can help us continue to grow? Where can we find you?
Well, you can go to the Results on Purpose channel on YouTube. That's the best way to find our video content. There is also the podcast, which is usually just a longer treatment of the subject that we posted on YouTube. And of course, everything gets on LinkedIn. And typically the content is something has occurred or an idea has come up as I'm working with a client. It's like, oh, that's something that should be shared. Or here's a typical challenge. And, it's right in front of me. So we'll go back and shoot a few minutes on that thing. So it's mostly designed for owners, and also it's designed for owners to share with their leadership teams and ideally say, let's watch this for 3 or 4 minutes and have a conversation. How does it apply to us?
And for the record, everybody listening to this should be doing that. So whenever you're having a client conversation and they ask you a question that 25 of your other clients should know the answer to, then you should be flipping on the Zoom and recording your screen. And I mean, it's just that simple nowadays, right? So like if I were to just be sitting here by myself, all I would need to do is put on Zoom, hit record, save that file and upload it to my social channel of choice, and it's done. You can get a lot more well-produced than that if you want, but it doesn't need to be. But the reality is that the questions that your clients are asking and the problems they are facing are the best content you can create. And I double down in every episode about content creation is how you're going to help to grow your marketing channels. And people want to hear it from the leaders. They want to hear it from the executives of the company. They want to know your perspective. So share it. But great stuff, Jeff. And we'll link out to all those resources in the show notes. And I really appreciate you spending some time and dropping some knowledge on us today, man.
Oh, anytime, man. It's my pleasure. It's a lot of fun. Thanks, and of course, I love what I do, so I love to talk about it.
If you enjoyed that episode, please share it with someone else you know who might enjoy it and learn from this. And also, please rate us 5 stars on your favorite podcast player. We really appreciate you taking the time to listen. And also, don't hesitate to reach out with other topics you'd like to hear more about. Thanks so much.